Hi, my name is Jared Fawcett. This is Lisa Fawcett. We are former LDS members. We were members for over 30 years and came to the true and living biblical Jesus and by His grace. How this came about in our story, we kind of have different stories, and I'll let her explain her side. I'll explain mine. I was raised in a home. I was adopted into an LDS home and raised LDS. It's very conditional, which I'm sure a lot of LDS people will understand. If you weren't doing exactly what they wanted, it didn't matter. The love was based on that. I had periods in my life where I would come out of it and go back in, including 1 year up in Idaho. I was actually a worship pastor for a year before going back into the LDS church. One could say that I probably wasn't saved yet at that point. And then we were brought down here for a job, and it was actually going to a concert. We went to the road show there in West Valley, and I felt the Spirit like I hadn't felt for 8 years at that point, because that's how long I had been back in, listening to Christian artists such as Matthew West and For King and Country, and feeling that again, knowing that there was something different. I actually had a guy that I worked with who was LDS but got his theology degree from Yale, who heard about what I was doing, and he said that I should go to a church there in Orem. He's like, that's where you need to go. So he was kind of the catalyst this time for me leaving. And I prayed before I went to the church, I know something's missing. I don't care what it is and what it costs. I need to know. So tell me if I should stay and go do the whole Mormon thing, or tell me if I should leave and do this. That day, I went to church, got a good message at Centerpoint Church in Orem. Went, and at the time I was going to doing both, so I went to sacrament meeting that time, because at the time I was like, I'm just going to do both. That day at church, actually, weird coincidence, people can call it coincidence, I call it, divine grace, but we were actually missed when they were doing the sacrament with the water that day. And we were in a side pew. We weren't out in the foyer or something. We were right there, and we were missed. And it just popped in my head at that point, I'm the living water. And I went, oh, okay. It was kind of my answer of what I needed to do. I needed to leave. And so I decided at that point, I'm like, well, I'm going to go. But I'm still going to do both, because we're in Utah County. It's part of I need my job, my friends, everything. It's all tied to my membership. And then when I went to Centerpoint the second time, I actually met the pastor, and that's when I was basically told, because I was like, I'm not going to talk about it, I'm just going to do both, personal relationship. And that's when I got the inkling after meeting with the pastor that now I want you to do this. And this is what started the argument between me and God of, yeah, but if I got to do this, that means I got to talk. That means I can't be quiet. That's not fair. And so we got in a big argument about that, especially him dragging me down to Utah County before doing that. And it ended up, losing a lot of friends, lost a job, disowned by family. But, as it says in Matthew, if you love your mom or your dad more than him, or if you love your kids more than him, you're not worthy of him. So it doesn't matter anymore. It just doesn't. In Mormonism, you're taught that family's everything, but you come to find out that Jesus is everything, and that's all that counts. So once you have the real gospel and the real grace staring it in the face, it's so much different, and it's such a load off. It's such an easier yoke to carry than the works-based, please love me, God, person that you're going for, when he's sitting there the whole time behind you, just with his arms open going, I'm here. So since then, and I'll let her kind of tell her story too. Since then, I'm now studying to be a pastor at Liberty, and I run my own outreach ministry especially to ex-Mormon atheists down there in Utah County, which there isn't many of them, and hope to bring many more in with God's help, Solo Deo Gloria that way.
Okay, well, I guess it's my turn. So, Jared and I have been married for 16 years. We have 3 wonderful children, a 15-year-old daughter, an 11-year-old son, and a 2-year-old son. And like Jared said, he did leave the LDS Church when we lived in Idaho for about a year. And at that point, that was really hard for me because in the LDS Church, family is everything, and I felt like my family was falling apart. And it was really hard. I felt like a single mom going to church, and I was almost ashamed to tell people that my husband was going to a different church. And I was part of the reason that he came back. I was probably the main reason why he came back. So we moved to Utah about 5.5 years ago. And we were still LDS at that point. And then about 2 years ago is when we left the LDS Church. And when Jared came and told me that he felt like God was asking him to become a pastor, that was a big deal for me. But I was older, I was wiser. I knew that I didn't want to lose my husband because of what God was telling him to do. So I decided to open up the Bible more and build my own relationship with God. And we had multiple talks about what Christianity is, how it's different from the LDS faith, and we came to realize that God's Spirit is not in the LDS religion. We would go to church and we felt guilty all the time for maybe not having food storage or not having specific things for our children, or maybe for our children acting in a different way. And that's not God's way. God wants us to be happy. He talks about joy all the time throughout the Bible. And so I was really struggling, but really just trying to find out who God was and find out the truth. And one of the big doctrines in the LDS Church is that work saves you, and if you do so many things after you die, you will become a god. And as an LDS member, I wasn't really sure how I felt about that, but that was one of my main breaking points of leaving the LDS Church, because as I was reading the scriptures and praying and reading the Bible specifically and praying, I was talking to Jared one day, and I almost talked in a way that I didn't recognize who was talking. But I said, well, what if I don't want to become a god? What if I just want to be with God? And in Isaiah, it says that God was there in the beginning, and that no one can become a god. And I'm not quite the scriptorian he is. But,
Isaiah 43:10, for anybody who wants to look it up.
But I don't believe that man can become God, and I don't believe that God ever was man. And so that was my breaking point of leaving the LDS Church. I was like, okay, why am I part of a religion that contradicts the Bible? where if the Bible is the Word of God, why don't they believe in the Word of God? And so at that point, I decided that we were going to go and be Christian and leave everything that we grew up with, leave everything that we knew, and grow closer to God, because we knew that God was pulling us towards Him because He loves us. And I felt God's love way differently now as a Christian than I ever even thought I could in the Mormon church. And so that's basically my story. So.
And I mean, through this, we've actually gotten a lot closer than we ever thought we would be.
Sure.
We've kind of had to. Not only has putting God at the center of our marriage helped out a lot, as much as you think, as LDS people think, temple marriages are centered around God. No, they're centered around rituals. And it's Masonic and rituals anyway. It's not God-centered. We actually renewed our vows on our 16th wedding anniversary last year at the Christian church. And we were challenged by our parents. Wasn't your other marriage good enough? No, it wasn't. But anyway, we have since, really put God first. It really has changed a lot. We approach things from more of a biblical basis. It's a living document. I mean, here's the truth of the matter is, too many times are people looking for, that's too easy. And that's a very wicked position anyway. If you have to have a stern father to do the right thing, you're not changed, you're not woken up, your heart isn't made new, it's still stone. So it's time to just wake up and come to the real gospel. You've all fallen short. The best news that you'll ever hear as a Mormon is that you'll never do enough. Ever. You will never do enough. But that's okay, because Jesus did enough. You don't have to do enough. So.
Okay, do you guys have any questions?
Yeah, so what brought you out of the LDS church the first time when you were up in Idaho?
Up in Idaho. Well, that's a good question. That's a really good question. So I was actually really inactive at that point. I was part of a motorcycle group up there. And there was an annual blessing of the bikes that a Christian church did up there. And I met the pastor. He was the chaplain of the POWMIA biker group up there. And he blessed my bike. And the spirit that I felt when he blessed that bike was something, as a Mormon, I only associated with Mormon things. And I was like, wait, this guy has a lot of spirit on him. And so I ended up I went to his church because I was like, well, I want something. And became a worship leader pretty quick. I know how to play guitar. So it became, he's like, oh, you know how to play guitar? Oh, you know how to do that? And I wrote probably half of the songs that they still use there. And I definitely came back because I didn't want to lose her. But yeah, that's what caused me, was him. And he's a big reason. I didn't know this until after I had started seminary, but he's a big reason why I'm still in leadership now. And I got the pull. I will say that he had a lot to do with it, because he admitted to me after, he's like, good, my prayers have finally worked. And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, well, I knew you were going to be a leader. He's like, I was praying for you to get back into ministry and leave the second you went back. And I've been doing this now for 8 years. So I'm glad to see it worked.
Wow. Yeah.
So.
Praise God. Yeah.
So Lisa, did you go to church with him at all up there in Idaho?
A couple times, yeah.
And what did you think? What was your impressions?
Honestly, I thought it was very different from what I knew. And I wasn't too sure what to think, and I couldn't figure out if he actually believed what was preached there, or if he was following friends who went there. And
That's why when she knew. That's why when we came to Utah County and I left, she knew. She's like, "Well, you're not doing this for anything social." That's social suicide, but that's not social gain.
Explain how Utah County is different than Salt Lake County.
So Salt Lake County, wow, Utah County makes Salt Lake County look like a liberal state. Utah County is very much owned by BYU. BYU owns that city, both cities. It owns Orem, it owns Provo, it pretty much owns Lehigh. It's pretty much got Spanish Fork and Springville too. I mean, it's probably still at this point. Center Point's big. They're probably the mega church of Utah County. They have probably close to 1,800 members now.
Wow.
So they're getting big, but they're still, I want to say 90% LDS up there.
Yeah.
Still.
Still. So we're working on that. We'll get there. But it's one of the reasons why I think he pulled me there before taking me out. But yes, there's a big difference. Down there, you'll lose friends, jobs. You could lose housing because you're not LDS. They, of course, won't say that because, laws and all that fun stuff. Like the job I lost, they just kept making it harder and harder until I left. But it was definitely pushed out. But it didn't happen until after I left and after it was known. So.
Did you guys, and probably individual, but did you guys accept Jesus as your Lord while you were a Mormon or after you left Mormon?
I'll go ahead and.
Yeah, you go first.
Yeah, I can go ahead and start that. Honestly, as a Mormon, I didn't know what that meant. I believed that, I was born in the covenant, and as long as I got baptized, got my endowments, went to the temple, then God would save me. And as long as I was worthy to do those things, then I was perfectly fine. And then becoming a Christian, and another thing too that I kind of forgot this detail, but so not only did I realize that I couldn't become a god, but also that I didn't want to. Then I just started thinking about, if our God is loving and he loves everybody, then why was I so lucky to be born in the right family, in the right town, where someone maybe on the other side of the world wouldn't get the chance? And I felt like that's not who God is. God wants himself to be known worldwide. He doesn't want us to have to work for his love. And so...
And he doesn't only want 16 million of us. Or so the rules say.
So coming back to your question, it did take me a little bit to realize what that meant, because I grew up believing that I had God, that I was saved because I worked for it. And then after becoming a Christian, I realized that that's not something that you can work for. It's something that you have to choose. And so I made the decision to follow God and accept Jesus as my Savior after becoming a Christian.
Amen.
So I'm kind of an interesting story, because I would say that I accepted it before going back with her. Even when I went back, I put in time. When I left, I know how they say that, no active Mormon leaves. I had 2 stake callings when I left. So you have the ward, you have the stake, so stakes above many wards, and I left. So, but I would say that I accepted it before I went back that time. And the moment I accepted it was actually at the church where I was the worship pastor. And it wasn't me. It was totally done through God. I was definitely. I mean, I was a depraved biker. What can you say? I was hanging out with those guys. But the great thing about Blazing Grace, which was the church in Idaho, is we had more Harleys than we did cars, and everybody came in with their cuts. I mean, we were known as biker church. It was a thing. But we. But I'll remember the day. It was during one of Rev's, the pastor there. Rev was preaching, and he said, "Well, you know, who out there needs to accept Jesus?" You know, and he was going through that. And of course, I was Mormon. I'd been raised Mormon, and was like, "I'm good." And right when he said that, all of a sudden I'm like, and I went, "Wait a second." But you know, so that happened, and I just remember after, you know, I know it's more than just a prayer, but after accepting that, just this whole weight was lifted off. Even when I went back to the LDS church, I never took off this. I had another cross, not this specific one. Don't go on Amazon, by the way. You can find a lot of crosses, and they add up really quick. The thing that brought me back, that let me stay there for a bit, was Brad Wilcox's talk on grace. I realize it's not correct now, but I'm like, if my position on grace can be accepted, sadly even Brad's position can't be accepted. I would love to get into a room with him and really talk real grace, because I think he is like close to understanding it at this point.
Can you explain who Brad Wilcox is?
Brad Wilcox is the chair of education at BYU, and he's done a lot of videos. He did one that was His Grace is Sufficient, where he basically went against the position of the LDS Church, saying that Christ does everything and that we do nothing, which is so against 2 Nephi for them, where we have to do everything and then we're saved. So, which is why I wish I could talk to him, because like I said, he's really close. But that's why. And then when I left, it was totally through music was the big thing that brought me out the second time, and it helped. We never stopped listening to K-Love the whole time either. So.
Did you guys actually, did you separate or not?
No, we
You
were really
always,
close.
Always together,
Yes.
but never separated.
Right.
We got really close,
Yeah, we did get really close.
but through God's grace. No.
Yeah.
What's your relationship with your mom and dad now?
So with mine, it's interesting. So I was adopted into that family. But I know my birth family. I met them when I was younger, when I was like my 20s, early 20s. They're non-religious, so I have a great relationship with them, because they're all about, you know, whatever makes you happy. Oh, you're Christian? Yeah, that's cool. They're ranchers. They're like, cool, we gotta go feed the cows. You know, they don't really care. So I'm really close. I'm still close with them. I was close with them when I was Mormon. I was close with them when I could be atheist, and they'd be like, "Oh, that works for you. Let's do that." They just don't talk religion at all. Then my LDS family, very much, yeah, it's a disowning process. My adoptive family, so the 3 siblings above me in that family are their blood. I was the only one that was adopted. Growing up, I used to love to hear things like, "Why don't you act a lot more like them?" I'm like, well, you know, genetics, but, you know, just little things. My oldest brother in that family is a bishop and seminary teacher. My middle sister, she's in a relationship with her husband. They live up in Idaho. Her husband's we'll just leave it at that. And then you got my sister that's right above me, and her husband's a bishop. So you can imagine we have a lot of fun when we get together. Having the Protestant pastor in the same room. And I also don't have a filter with them. It's very much, so you want to hear the real gospel? And because of that, I mean, the last thing that they did was actually on my birthday, which was last month. They made this big show of taking me out to eat and everything. And they took me to the Nashville Tribute Band show, and they talked up, because Nashville Tribute Band does have a Bible album. Kind of find out they're pretty much LDS. They even sang a song that was honoring Porter Rockwell and the blood on his hands. So, and I just sat there the whole time, went. And then afterwards, there was no hugging, there was no, hi, we're so glad to see you. It was, did you like it? Not really. They can sing harmony. And then them walking away, it's, I basically don't, the only reason that they keep me around is so that they have some form of connection with my kids. And I'll let her tell her side of the story. I didn't have a connection with her parents pretty much from day one, so, well, her mom likes me, but.
So, my family's kind of split. I have 5 siblings, and my little sister is also Christian, and then the rest of my family is LDS, including my parents. So I do talk to them on occasion. We do have some family drama and some disagreements for sure. But overall, it's just, we just talk when we need to communicate about something. Other than that, we don't really talk much. They live in Idaho, we live in Utah. They come to visit about once a year. And yeah, I'm really close to my little sister.
Were you instrumental in bringing her to the Lord then?
I'm not exactly sure if I can say that. Partly, she said that it's mostly just like what we post on Facebook. And she's just trying to bring God back into her life after being without him for years. And so she's just trying to find him again and reading the Bible and growing that relationship with God. And it's just caused some dissonance, I guess, in my family. But yeah, I'll still talk to my mom when she calls. I have a harder time talking to my dad. We've had lots of falling out situations that I won't go into too much detail. But yeah, overall, they're not very supportive of where we're at. They're hoping and praying that we'll come back. And we don't really talk religion when we get together. We'll talk about anything but religion. So, yeah, that's kind of my
Does
relationship.
God comfort your heart? Like you don't have any hard feelings toward him, or you do have hard feelings?
No, there's, so I didn't have the best childhood. My parents tried really hard, but there was a lot of conflict, confrontation, just overall contention in my household growing up. And us moving away, I've had time to heal. I've had time to open my mind to what life can be, and I don't want to carry any ill feelings with anyone in my family. I just want to, because I realize that if I don't forgive anything that's happened, then I can't help them come closer to God. So I want to be used as a tool, and I don't want any conflict with that relationship.
Amen.
Coming from me.
So with me, like I mentioned, Matthew, I don't have any ill feelings towards them. I don't have any ill feelings towards Mormons in general. I feel that if you're angry with them, and I've seen a lot of ex-members who are, you haven't left yet. Truly, you have not left yet.
That's right.
You're still connected.
You want to talk about Thrive?
So, a good example of that actually is Thrive. It's John DeLynne's group. They gather together, they talk about how angry they are with the LDS faith and how And they talk not as they're apart, they're away from it, but they want to reform it. I mean, that's the best way to explain it. They wish they could still be Mormon, and Mormonism would be something else than what it is.
Yeah.
Me, I've come to the point now where I don't let Utah County define where I'm at. They would like to call me ex-Mormon, post-Mormon, whatever, not a non-member. I'm Christian. I'm not any of those. I refuse to have any of those titles.
Amen.
So, no, I refuse to have those titles, and I refuse for them to give them to me. They don't get to name me. And in fact, there's always the jokes, especially among the members. What was your new name in the temple? What was your new name? And, I forgot mine. If I'm being honest, I really did.
Wow.
So my joke is like, oh yeah, I'm the child of the one true King. Yeah, that's my name. And then they're like, shut up. But no, I don't have any ill feelings towards the faith at all. In fact, I love them. I wish, and that's why I preach to them. That's why I talk to them, is because I want them to see the truck that's barreling down on them and push them out of the way. So my family, I have no ill feelings towards them, but if they want to choose religion over relationship, which is what they're doing, it's like it says in Matthew, if you love your mom and dad more than him, you don't deserve him. So I don't. Jesus is everything. God is everything. And because of that, I can be comforted that no matter what they do, no matter how they act, I have a Father who is perfect, who I don't have to impress, who I don't have to play games in order to have him be with me always. So it doesn't matter what they're doing here. I don't, and it does weird out some ex-members that I've been around, because Mormonism as a whole, even though they won't come out and say it, their idol's family is who they worship. It's all about family. And so it's weird even for ex-members to be like, so you don't care that your parents are like, I'm like, doesn't that hurt you like deeply? I'm like, no. They're just choosing religion over relationship. I'm like, I have Jesus. What else do I need?
Yeah.
I'm like, I feel bad for them because they don't have Jesus. That's sad. But I don't have any ill feelings.
So what do you, how do you usually approach when you're talking with someone and you find out that they're LDS? So how do you initiate the conversation into spiritual things?
So usually it's good to ask them questions to see exactly what they mean by that. Because even though the LDS like to claim that there's only one faith, there is splinter groups. There's more splinter groups than they think, and there's also a lot of diversity. And so, who am I dealing with? Am I dealing with somebody who's teetering right now? Am I dealing with somebody who's very strong? So I ask them a lot of questions like, well, what do you think about, God? What's your view on this? And sadly, in today's thing, a lot of it, you have to almost convert them to their own faith. As my friend Jeff Durbin likes to say, in order to convert them out nowadays, you have to convert them in. Because in today's LDS church, they try to be as close to Christian as possible so they don't really preach, like she was talking about, becoming a god. A lot of your post-millennial Mormons don't even know what that is. You're like, oh, you're going to become a god one day, and they're like, huh? And so you have to show them like their theology, and then they go, oh, really? So it's a lot of teaching actually that goes on. Like, let me teach you about your faith, so I can teach you about mine, but I need to teach you about yours first, so you can see the difference. That you're not Christianity, and there's a reason why.
You got two jobs now.
Yeah, I really do. But it's a lot of that, a lot of question taking, like learning about them, caring about them, and occasionally rebuking them really sharply. It depends on the situation, but sometimes it just comes down to An example was I had a person, this kid, who kept on like trying to badger me. He was LDS, and we were in a situation where I really couldn't talk to him due to restrictions. And then one day we were out of the restrictions, and I said, "Okay, you're asking me to do this," and he's like, "Yeah, I want to know." So I just, the thing is, a lot of times when people are evangelizing to that community, they like to focus on things like history or other things like that. All you got to do is take out their view of God, and the rest of it's going to go with it. So I just looked at him. I said, "Okay, right now, here's my phone." I pulled out YouVersion, pulled up Isaiah 43:10 in the King James Version, just so I didn't break his thing, and went, "Read it." And he read it. Before me there was no God formed, neither shall there be after me. I said, "Okay, Isaiah 44:6, here we go." And he's like, "Is there any God beside me? I know not one." And he's like, "My dad never showed me those. I need to go talk to him." The shelf was just... So, occasionally you got to be sharp. Occasionally you got to... Depends on the person.
Yeah, definitely depends on the person. And also talking about grace too. In 2 Nephi it says that men are saved by grace after all that you can do, where in Ephesians it talks about how men are saved by faith alone, so that and not by works, so no man can boast. So those two scriptures can't be true at the same time. In the LDS faith, they also claim to believe the Bible as long as it's translated correctly. Well, pointing out that their Bible also says that they can't be saved by works, then they either have to deny that the Bible is true or deny that their religion is true.
So when, of course, the Book of Mormon says in 1 Nephi 13 that all these plain and precious truths were taken out. So you probably bought that growing up as a Mormon. So what was it about the Bible that gave you confidence in it, that when you read Isaiah 43 verse 10 for the first time, that you actually believed it, instead of, that's just one of those plain and precious things that probably was tampered with by the great abominable church,
So for me, the thing, honestly, that cemented me out, so I'd left the second time, and because of all the social pressure, I was in the middle of almost losing my job. I was like, if I just went back, everything would go back to normal. It was actually, there's a movie out there called The Gospel for Mormons that Apologia puts on, that Jeff does, where he brings up Isaiah 43:10 and all these things. And if you've ever seen what he does, it ends the debate with the whole plain and precious truths taken out. Because if any Mormon, and I have a Hebrew and Greek concordance on my phone just for this, that if they say, well, it's mistranslated correctly, I'm like, okay, let's read the Greek. This is what the Greek says. And once you really learn about the Bible and learn that things like the Iliad, the Odyssey, we only have 3 or 5 copies of these ancient things that English departments treat like they're the most correct thing ever. We have over 6,000 manuscripts for the Bible. If there was something that was mistranslated, we would know.
Yeah.
One scribe being tired and messing up a word was caught. I mean, and that's the thing, is once you learn about the back of the Bible, the real one, you can't not take it as authority anymore. Mm-hmm. And the same thing is and even if you're a scientific mind, they found the place now where they think Sodom and Gomorrah happened. They found all these places in the Bible through archaeology. Even if you want to go that route, where's the big cities by the hill of Gomorrah? It doesn't add up. Right. And so, yes, but growing up, I definitely thought that everything was wrong. But I also grew up during the different period than the post-millennial current Mormon. I grew up in a period where we would never want to be called Christian. Mm-hmm. We were Mormon. And Mormon was different. We were the Restorationists. They were corrupt. Mm-hmm. Now we're Christian just like you. So it's different. message that's coming out of Salt Lake right now.
So did you read the Bible as Mormons?
Yes.
But
I wouldn't say I read the Bible. I read the Bible through the lens of Mormonism.
Yeah.
You'd read parts, and you'd mostly read the parts that were in manuals. Through my college education, I read it. But part of my undergrad was I had an undergrad in psychology. Part of my thing in psychology was the effect of religion on the psyche. So I read the Bible, I read the Book of Mormon, read the Doctrine and Covenants, read the Pearl of Great Price, read the Quran, read the Gita. So I read all of the books. But still, you read it with the arrogance of, yeah, but this is the correct, so we're good. Mm-hmm. And I will say that after leaving and the Spirit totally opening your eyes, you read it again and go, was that always in there? Well, wait a second. Oh, that was in there too. That too. But what about, hold on, let me flip the page. Oh, that too. Okay, we're good. It's a living document. It's going to answer any questions you have. So.
What do you say to Mormons that when they say we're Christian too? What's your response? There's a bunch of ways you can take that. Biggest thing I do is point them to the fact that you have to believe in order for you to be an Orthodox Christian, you have to believe in the Trinity. Because even though there's divisions, there's Baptists, there's Presbyterians, there's non-denominational Christians, there's all of these different denominations. But on the essentials, we agree. There's no difference. We argue over non-essentials all day long. Hello. We'll argue all day long. But we don't argue from a fact of, if I'm very much a Calvinist, but if I'm arguing with an Armenian, I don't think they're not saved. I know they're saved. I just wish they bought into my systematic theology. So, but it's a lot different. They don't know God in order to know who He is. They believe three separate beings. They don't believe in the Trinitarian doctrine, so they can't believe that we do. I actually saw it online, and I occasionally will use it. A Christian who was friends with Mormons a lot used it, where he'll point out the difference by saying, "Oh, well, I'm Mormon now," and of course that makes the Mormon happy. Oh, really? Yeah, I believe in Joseph Smith. She was born in 1964 in Missouri, and she did this and this, and they're like, "Wait, she 1960? That's not Joseph Smith. 1960? Yeah, no, but I believe I'm Mormon, right? Because I believe in Joseph Smith. She was, doing this, but and they're like, but that's not the same Joseph Smith." And you just sit there for a second. Not the same Jesus. Okay. Do you ever use the history of the Mormon Church to witness to them?
Rarely, only if I need to, and that's usually for somebody who's been entrenched for a long time, or somebody who's really deep, like a professor, or something like that. I will use it. On the lay member, rarely. Most lay members don't know their theology anyway, and so you just strictly need to show them the gospel. That's the one thing. Is if you preach the gospel to them, the real gospel, the fact that they can't do everything, the fact they'll never do enough, and show them that they don't have to, and that God's loving, it ends it for a lot of them. And it doesn't do it because of my efforts or what I say. It does it, purely through His Spirit and through His glory. And He just uses me. I am smaller, He is bigger. That's kind of my
Yeah.
For whatever it's worth, God revealed to me, 10 years ago, in the history of the church, Joseph Smith, of course, saying that he's greater than Jesus. And I've had a lot of success at Mormons really questioning their faith once they realize that the prophet that they put so much weight in believes he's greater than Jesus, and he said it in his own words, "I'm greater than Jesus."
Yeah, no, it works. The problem I have, so my unconditional election ministries, I'm not Calvinist at all, that I run and help ex-Mormons who have turned atheist. a lot of the problems is if you focus on the history side of things, a lot of the Mormons that I've dealt with, where you focus on history, end up atheist. Because if they can't trust the history, if they can't trust everything, then they can't trust God. But if you preach the gospel to them and preach and go from that message, a lot of them go, oh, I don't believe in the real God. That's the real God. And you don't have to have the transition period. They just come straight over to Christianity instead of having to go through the angry period.
Do you find that most LDS use worthiness as a synonym to righteousness and vice versa? Or
Good question.
To a point.
because when I ask them if they're worthy, they always say, "Well, I'm trying."
Yeah.
So that's the thing is they'll say yes, but in their heart they don't believe that.
Right.
Because they got their card.
They got their
The
card.
temple recognized. Of course I'm worthy.
Of course I'm worthy, but they know.
But do they use the words simultaneously?
I wouldn't say they do. I don't
You
think. I would say like when I was LDS, I never felt righteous.
Uh-huh.
I would feel worthy to enter the temple, but I never felt righteous.
Uh-huh.
That was something I was obtaining. That was one of the weights that got lifted off of me when I found Jesus. Was you're not righteous, and that's okay, because that's who I came to save. I didn't come to save. I mean, look how he treated the religious leaders of his day. He didn't come to save the Pharisees and the Sadducees.
That's right.
And that's, he didn't come to save those people. He came to correct them, and hopefully they would come the right way. He came to die for the sinner.
So their worthiness is dependent on their card carrying. Right?
Yes, it depends on
But
acts.
the righteousness is separate in a separate category. Would
Right.
You say?
Yeah, it's a separate category because you're wondering, even though, so the biggest thing you can do is be married in the temple. That's kind of like the penultimate act. That's what gets you. So Celestial Kingdom for them has 3 levels. The top level is where you get to become a god. To get to that 3rd level, you have to be married in the temple. That's the end. Of course, if you read Doctrine and Covenants, it says you have to have multiple wives. That hasn't been taken out yet, but we won't go into polygamy.
Small thing.
It's small, but they don't know that. But you're taught basically in Brighamite theology, which is the biggest group among Mormonism, that once you're married in the temple, it's your highest thing. But even when you're married in the temple, you go back to 2 Nephi where you're reading, you're saved after all you can do, and you're constantly worrying, you're like, am I doing enough? And that's why everybody in the faith, when you're around them, go, do you know the service project I just did? Oh, the prophet just released a new book. I just read it. Have you?
So there's no assurance of salvation.
No assurance of salvation.
Yeah.
Zero.
Kind of the way that I
You
would
hope.
classify them is worthiness, like it's been mentioned, is am I worthy to enter the temple? Righteousness is kind of more like, am I worthy enough to enter heaven or enter the presence of God?
The highest
And
Am I saved?
and like in that religion, it's true. It's like, well, have I done enough? Like, is God gonna accept what I've done as enough to enter?
So they have no concept of being born again.
No.
No.
They don't know what that is.
No, I mean even baptism is just a covenant, just to become a member.
It's just a step along the way.
It's a step
Uh-huh.
among what they call the covenant path now.
Well, yeah, I mean, you do talk to certain Mormons that do say that they are born again. And Enos in the Book of Mormon clearly talks about being born again. So what is that for these Mormons?
For them, I think it's just trying to assimilate. Same thing as the rest of the postmillennial. I mean, Enos says that, but let's be honest, how many Christians do we have that read the Bible?
Yeah.
how many LDS people would actually read the Book of Mormon and even know that it's there? Most of them, when you point out 2nd Nephi to them, when you're trying to point Ephesians, they're like, it says what?
Wait.
Yeah.
I
Because
missed that.
it's not a verse that gets trouted out a bunch, because obviously the church knows that we can easily go with that one.
But even if they do claim to be born again, there's still
They're still
no
just trying.
guarantee that they're going to get in exaltation
No.
or even the celestial kingdom for that matter.
Well, and the greatest thing that I heard Jeff say, and I love using it on LDS people too, is if you're right and I'm wrong, I know you're going to do my work when I'm dead. So I'll end up in your second heaven, which is what I want anyway, because your second heaven is basically worshiping Jesus as angels, so we'll be good. I'm like, but if I'm right and you're wrong, that's hell. I kind of like my house.
Well, along with your question too, like, I felt like I was doing pretty good as a Mormon. You know, I stuck with doing the right things in order to get in the temple, and I was like, well, I'm not a sinner. Like, I'm doing the best
Sounds
that I
like
can.
My mother-in-law, same thing.
You know, I'm doing the best that I can. You know, I'm raising my kids in the church. My husband's coming to church. He holds the priesthood. You know, I was like, I check all the boxes. So honestly, I feel like I'm good, and I believe in God. You know, and that I felt secure in that as a Mormon. Except I was like, well, you know, I'm doing all these things, so I should be good, right?
Should be.
But, you know, I was a fan of some shows and stuff that was not good. I loved vampires, I loved witches, I loved basically anything like dark like that, and I didn't see anything wrong with that. When I became a Christian, I can't stand being in the same room as those sorts of things. I can't be in a conversation about them. I have a completely different heart.
The
So
old passes away.
I thought I was saved. I thought I was born again as a Mormon. But now I can see the difference of who I am and who I used to be.
That's really interesting because we came from Texas, and which is the Bible Belt, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But what amazed us is the LDS, how fascinated they are with Halloween. I mean, they celebrate it like Christmas, you know.
Oh, I remember growing up. At my church when I was younger. One of the members actually pulled a semi-truck like trailer out in front of the church, and we turned it into like a spook alley
Yeah, we
for the
turned
kids.
a church into a
I
spook alley.
had a severed head. I was a severed head for a night. So yes, they really do. You had a question.
Yeah, how does the Mormon conception of the multi-tiered heaven come up in your discussions with them?
Yeah, it is a good question. A lot of times, I don't deal with a lot of people in that situation. Like I said, I deal with a lot of ex-Mormon atheists. So I'm convincing them just that, heaven exists. But the multi-tiered heaven, a lot of times they'll talk about that. But you just have to bring up the scriptures where it says, that we'll be worshiping them where we're being, and that we're basically, we're not married in heaven. There's a bunch of different things that basically like level the playing field among us. Once we're there, it's all for His glory, not ours. And once it's for His glory, the celestial glory, the terrestrial glory, the telestial glory, that's your glory. Your glory doesn't matter anymore. So if your glory doesn't matter anymore, what does it matter? So,
Did you guys get baptized, and
yes.
how long after? Or
It was not too long after, actually.
Yeah. So he started attending Center Point in Utah, the end of May.
April.
at the end of April, and he went about 3 or 4 times without me, and I was like, okay, well, you can go ahead and do that, and I'll listen to what you talk about, but I'm not gonna go. I'm gonna continue to go to the Mormon church because I have a calling there. You know, our kids are there. And then one day I was like, okay, you know, I'm gonna go with you. We'll take the kids. We'll just kind of see, because that's when my whole Mormon testimony was falling apart, where I needed something else, because I was like, wait, I remember sitting there in Relief Society one time, and this was the week before I went to Christian church with him, where we were talking about family and preparing for the second coming and having a food storage and all this stuff. And I'm like, okay, I can barely, we were doing okay financially, but I'm like, well, I don't even have room to store any food storage. I live in a tiny apartment. I've got this new baby, and I don't even know how to do that. So I guess I'm in trouble. And I was like, that's not the God that I want to believe in. That's not the biblical God, because at that time I was reading the Bible more and comparing the Bible with the Book of Mormon and noticing.
And that's when you read Matthew 6, where he says, what are you worrying about what you're eating and what you're wearing? Do not be anxious for that. For the pagans worry about that. Wait.
And it was that summer, that we got baptized. So just a few months, because at Center Point they have a summer barbecue where they do baptisms in the Provo River.
In the river.
And Jared was like,
it's very cold.
It was very cold. It was very cold. Yeah.
But it was like 100
demons out of you.
But it was like it was like a 90. I want to say like a 98 to almost 100 degree day.
Yeah.
So it was actually kind of nice going underneath the water to be 100.
Right.
Were you guys buried in the temple?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, up in
Idaho Falls.
Idaho, yeah.
Idaho Falls Temple. Yes, we were.
Did it freak you out the first time you went through?
Yes.
Yes.
It freaked me out every time I went through.
Yep.
And I could never remember anything, and I felt very stupid. Because they're like, wait, you've been here so many times, how do you not remember? And one time I forgot my name, and they had to pull me out of the room, and they're like, remember, it was this, and I'm like, oh, sorry. So anytime I went there, it wasn't the most welcoming experience, and so it felt weird, but it made me feel more bad about myself, and it didn't really make me question things, which kind of blows my mind now that I'm like, wait, why didn't I question things back then? Because it was such an uncomfortable experience.
So when I went through, it was uncomfortable. I went through obviously before her, because I went to the MTC, which you have to go before you go.
What is it?
On your mission.
Missionary Training Center.
Oh, okay.
I actually came home from the MTC with anxiety and panic attacks. I got sent home honorably. I made sure when I asked him, I discharged honorably, because again, works is a big deal. But it was weird. That's actually a whole story. When the mission thing came up the first time, I actually prayed about it a lot, and I actually got a no. God wants me not to preach that gospel anyway. So I was like, so I got a no. And then when I had the anxiety breakthrough, I didn't have anxiety until I was at the MTC. I never even experienced a panic attack until I was at the MTC.
You're talking about the Moroni 10 promise? Is that what you're talking
No.
about now? Or about going on the mission?
About praying about
at that
whether
time I was
we should go or not.
Go or not.
I see.
Because up where I was in Idaho, you weren't pressured into drinking. You had peer pressure to go on a mission. Everybody else is going on a mission. Why aren't you going on a mission? And it was very much, I got to know. So I like to joke that the second I went in, because God knew about the anxiety thing that was going to happen there, all my guardian angels went, who said yes? I thought the answer was no.
Yeah, it was really interesting though because I grew up and I was like, I'm gonna marry a returned missionary, have kids, be a stay-at-home mom, have the LDS dream, right?
Sure.
And honestly, like, if he didn't go on a mission, I wouldn't have even given him a second thought. Which I was pretty shallow back then. But I actually met him, what was it, like 2 months after you came back?
Mm-hmm.
So who knows what would have happened if he stayed the whole time. Like maybe we wouldn't have met, or, I mean, I don't know. God knows, but God set it up in a way that...
He's sovereign. It's the good old man plans, God laughs situation.
Yeah, I mean, but I definitely see God's hand in the way that we met and where we were in our lives, and I don't have any ill feelings for where I was or what I grew up with, because that made me who I am today. So
Yeah. Well, you have such a witness to the testimony to the grace of God. You know.
yeah.
Well, and the other thing with that too is we resigned so we could still have that witness. Because I was as high as I was when we moved houses when we decided to fully go into the Centerpoint community, so we were into a different stake. They found out we were getting baptized, and I actually got an email from that bishop who I'd never met.
Yeah, I got an email too.
Who
We
was
both
like, huh,
similar emails.
we heard you were getting baptized, so we can either take you to court for apostasy and excommunicate you, or you can take your name out. And I knew if I got excommunicated, that would be a barrier for any kind of witnessing to that community, so I resigned at that point and
It's a bad stigma.
went to quitmormon.com and did their whole thing. And,
So they do that without you even telling.
it was told through the grapevine of the spy network that is Utah County.
Wow. That's amazing.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah,
No, I
question.
guess you already answered, because why I want to ask you is your name has removed from the church?
Yes,
Church.
yes, our names are
Which is
removed.
good. Yeah, great.
Yes, very much so, and I did that for that reason.
And how did your kids respond?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the first time that we went to Centerpoint, so our 11-year-old boy has ADHD, and in the Mormon church, it was constantly, almost weekly, that I would get called into primary because the teachers there couldn't handle him, and they either wanted me to sit next to him or talk to him or take him with me to my class. Like it was almost constant that they're like, we just can't handle this kid. And
And if we ever asked him what he was learning about, he's like, well, so-and-so is goofing off, we played with crayons, so-and-so.
yeah, like he didn't learn anything there. And our daughter, like, she didn't have any friends in our ward. She hung out with friends at school, but she didn't really have any friends in the ward. The first time that we went to Centerpoint, all of my kids, like we have 3 kids, all of them went to their kids class, and we went to the worship service. Well, my daughter was with us because that's how they do it, like
High schools,
high
the
schools.
during second service.
Yeah. But we went and picked up my son the first time that we were there, and we said, okay, well, what did you learn? And he said, oh, I learned that God is approachable and that we can go to him with our problems, and that God wants to be our friend. And
We're like, huh.
And you did get called out during
And
the
I
service?
didn't.
Yeah, we didn't get called out, it was amazing, you know?
and
So in our 14-year-old, I actually had that discussion with her before we'd gone. She was actually in the presidency of her young women's group. And I said, hey, we're planning on doing this. And I was having this discussion with her, and her only response, I mean, praise God, was she's like, huh, so do we have to listen to conference anymore? I'm like, nope. She's like, huh,
do I have to wear a dress?
do I have to wear a dress? Nope. Huh. She goes, well, I always thought that they were like the middleman and got in the way of my relationship with him anyway, so cool.
Wow.
So that was her response. I'm like, cool. Moving on.
Yeah, so my kids
And then the 2-year-old, it's going to be very
transitioned very
interesting.
well.
The 2-year-old's gonna be very interesting because we actually have that experience now. We're going to be raising one child who will never know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He will never know.
Yeah.
All he will know is Christian. He will never know.
Yeah.
Amen.
Praise the Lord.
So.
Yeah.
All right.
What a blessing.
Okay, why don't we call it quits there? Would you
Okay.
guys like to pray? Close us in prayer?
I can do that.
Okay.
Father God, we come to your throne room at this time, and we give the glory to you.
Yes.
Have this word
Praise
go out and change hearts.
Mm.
Have it be a witness to this community, to release the chains that are over this state, so that the fountain that is now dry and the bones that are now dead can be raised up in your eyes and can be made alive. And the spring can just start, Father. Thank you for the grace that you give us, even though we don't deserve it. Thank you so much for having your Son die for us on that cross. We thank you. We love you, Father, and we praise you every day. And we say these things in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you.
Hallelujah.